Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed for a brief news episode. I'm here at our new podcast setup that we've made for the Hardware Unboxed podcast, separate channel. Maybe we'll link it below. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about some announcements that are coming out of Gamescom over in Germany. Unfortunately, we're not there, but the guys over at TFT Central are. And it looks like Asus have announced a couple of very interesting monitors that I think a lot of you would be interested in. So let's take a look. Let's break down some of these announcements and yeah, I'll just give some of my thoughts. The first product that's been announced is the Asus ROG Swift PG32 UCDM. So not the most imaginative name, certainly doesn't give any hints to what the product actually is. But as we can see from the title here, it is the highly anticipated 31.5-inch QD OLED panel that provides a 4K resolution and 240Hz refresh rate. So a lot of people have been asking for a larger format OLED. A lot of people have been asking for a 4K OLED that's at a reasonable size for most gamers. And so Asus, with this new product, are delivering both of those things. And this comes from, of course, the new Samsung QD OLED panels that are scheduled to be available in 2024. So this is very, very exciting for monitor fans because, yeah, if you wanted OLED up until this point, you had to deal with 27-inch 1440p, you could get 42-inch 4K, but there was nothing in that sort of mid-range that a lot of people were after. So we'll skip right down to the end. We'll talk about the specs in just a little bit. We'll skip right to the end of this article just to talk about, which is the launch date and pricing of this particular monitor. So TFT Central, speaking to Asus, say that there's an estimated launch date of Q1 in 2024. So they were saying early to middle part of Q1. However, if we also look at the panel production roadmap from TFT Central, if we have a look here, they are suggesting, Samsung at least, that their 31.5-inch 4K 240Hz panel would be available more in the sort of Q3 part of 2024, so in between Q2, Q3. So potentially that would suggest, assuming that this means availability for displays to be, mass produced and on the market at that exact point, that would imply more of a Q3 release. So it's interesting that Asus is more suggesting over here as sort of a Q1 release. So I'm not 100% sure whether that will be an accurate release date for this monitor. Maybe Asus has a special deal with Samsung to get these QD OLED panels a bit earlier. Potentially, if this roadmap was meaning more, mass production, not quite ready for the final products just yet, then you'd be looking more at, say, Q4 or even Q1 of 2025 for the monitor. That's sort of where I was thinking previously, if that's what that roadmap was sort of suggesting. But again, if we go back to the news article, they're suggesting this estimated launch in Q1. So, that's what Asus are claiming. From my perspective, we've seen with Asus products that they are very keen on announcing monitors a lot earlier than we may otherwise see them. So there's been many times in the past they've launched products at CES, Computex, those sorts of shows, and the monitor hasn't been released for months or even years. So when they're saying Q1, it's kind of like take that with a grain of salt. I think at this point, it's maybe more likely around Q2 or Q3 of that year. So probably about a year away, which is, it's going to impact people's buying decisions if you're after sort of that 32-inch 4K mini LED LCD or you're after something for true HDR, then potentially waiting for this monitor, the PG32 UCDM, would be the way to go. It's just a year away. You're probably going to be using your monitor for 5+ years. So you'd want to make that decision to, ensure that your monitor is lasting for quite a while. You wouldn't want to buy an outdated monitor only to regret it once this sort of OLED comes out. So the specifications as listed in this TFT Central article, obviously the 3840 by 2160 panel, 31.5-inch size, 240Hz refresh rate, and all the usual variable refresh rate technologies. So it's going to be compatible with all the GPU brands. It is got certified with AMD FreeSync Premium, so 0.03 millisecond greater gray response time. So we're not expecting any performance differences to the QD OLED and WOLED panels that we've seen before. I'd expect this to perform just like the other QD OLEDs, but obviously with a slightly higher refresh rate. Although I do believe there's newer monitors these days, like the Odyssey G9, the OLED one, that already go up to 240Hz on QD OLED. So it's not going to be the first there, but you know what I mean. HDR capabilities, 1000 nits has been rated for 3% APL, 400 nits, 10% 250 nits for 100% APL. So these are all the same OLED brightness specifications that we've seen from existing QD-OLED panels. And typically speaking, in my testing, you get pretty close to these figures. So these figures are quite accurate, I would say. 1,000 nits in real-world games, very possible. 400 nits at around a 10% window, yeah, that's very possible. And again, sort of that 250 nits for SDR content, just general desktop usage, makes it actually quite a usable monitor for regular everyday usage. And Asus are also going with their custom heatsink graphene rear panel, which means that it should they say that it's going to help with lifespan and reduce the risk of image retention. Not 100% sure how that's going to play out. We're not going to get concrete information on that for many years. But what it does typically do is also provide a bit better sustained brightness and things. Though, again, we haven't seen this tech used for a QD OLED panel yet because all of the Asus monitors so far have been WOLED. So at least operating without an active cooling fan is a bonus. So hopefully we won't see something like a AW3423GW where the fan's really, really annoying. QD OLED semi-glossy panel coating. So it's at least based on the impressions of TFT Central. And really I believe they're going to be doing maybe an in-depth hands-on with this, maybe a video over on their YouTube channel that will be definitely worth checking out once that's available. It does look like these QD OLED panels have a very similar coating and finish to what we've already seen from other QD OLED monitors. So that does mean that there are some issues with things like light reflectivity. If you've got lights in front of the display, it can often reflect a bit of the ambient light, reduces the sort of deep black effect that you like to see from OLED panels, but then it also does cut out quite a few reflections. But again, it is also a glossy coating, so it's not full reduction of mirror reflections. So it does use a second generation QD OLED panel, so there are a few differences there, but that's mostly related to things like the sub-pixel layout as opposed to the panel construction and how the polarizer layers and other layers to it affect reflections. So when we're seeing things like second-gen QD OLED, we're more talking about the improved text clarity that the sub-pixel layout brings, which was first debuted for the Samsung Odyssey OLED G9, a monitor that I actually haven't tested yet, so I haven't really looked at how that sub-pixel layout is improved with the second-gen QD OLED, but Simon from TFT Central believes that it is slightly improved, and I do trust his opinion. I think he's quite a good reviewer in general, so yeah, I would expect that would play out as well here with this. But on top of that, one of the benefits we're also going to be getting is just the 4K resolution. So higher pixel density combined with the improved text clarity of the slightly different, still not an RGB stripe, but it's more rectangular in nature. But anyway, the more improved sub-pixel layout plus the higher resolution is going to lead to hopefully far superior text quality and text rendering, which for a 4K monitor is key because I'm assuming a lot of buyers will be buying something like this to also use for productivity work. So you'd want a good sub-pixel layout, good text rendering, and yeah, we haven't really seen that with the 1440p class resolution QD OLED displays, but hopefully with something like this, much higher pixel density, we are going to be getting it. As well, DisplayPort 1.4, HDMI 2.1, USB Type-C, KVM is listed there as well. We can see the rear of the monitor looks pretty similar to the PG27 AQDM, where they've got this central box design, bit of RGB LED lighting that Asus always likes, and then it sort of extends outwards with this thinner panel out from the box. So here's generally where all the components are, the ports along the bottom there. So very similar to the 27-inch model at 1440p, but just scaled up to 32 inches and also with that higher resolution. So you can see a few more images that have been here throughout the presentation. Asus, you can sort of see here, claiming that it is the world's first 32-inch 4K OLED gaming monitor. Now, the brand Doe did, announce one of these monitors first. At least as far as I'm concerned, Doe is a highly questionable company in terms of their business practices, and I would not be really taking any of their claims with any sort of grain of salt. So yeah, I would much more likely believe that Asus would be releasing this product before Doe, even though Doe announced their product first. Who knows whether that Doe product is real or whether it will ever come out. They're doing their bizarre pre-order program that I'm not a huge fan of with different pricing and things. So I wouldn't be falling for that. I wouldn't be pre-ordering that monitor at all. Definitely don't do that because there's question marks over whether they'll deliver it. You're much better off waiting for brands like Asus and other brands that are going to be using this panel to produce their monitors, and then you can make a decision about whether the Dome monitor or the Asus monitors are going to be better. Pre-ordering with that company, not my advised strategy. So yeah, very exciting monitor. I'm very keen to check this out. If I was to guess what the sort of price that we'd be looking at for this sort of monitor, certainly well above $1,000 US. That said, I was very wrong with my estimates for the previous generation QD OLED monitors. They eventually debuted at $1,300, came down to around $1,100 to even $1,000 over time. And I was expecting those to be much more expensive, but that was without a lot of other OLED monitors on the market to really compare with. I think if this was launching in the current market, what we typically see is sort of the 1440p 27-inch monitors around $800 to $1,000. At the moment, we've got the 34-inch ultra-wides at around the $1,000 to $1,300. And there are some 4K mini LED monitors that are as well around $1,500, $1,600 US. Now, I would say a lot of people would probably be interested in buying this over one of the 4K mini LED options. But typically, OLED hasn't been that much more expensive or that much more premiumly priced than IPS LCDs with, actual true HDR capabilities. So based on all of that, I would be estimating a price in the sort of $1,500 US range, but I'd be very, very happy if it was priced a little bit below that. But again, if it's priced above $1,500 as well, there could still be reasons to buy it because, again, you're sort of getting a monitor and a type of monitor that doesn't really exist yet. So certainly very keen to check that out. We'll also take a look at the other monitor that Asus has announced at this trade show. Well, it's not really a trade show, Gamescom, it's sort of an event, but you know what I mean. It's the Asus ROG Swift PG34WCDM. 34-inch OLED panel and 240Hz refresh rate. Now, the first time I saw this, I was like, oh, okay, is there a QD OLED panel that's now being run at 240Hz? Because all of the previous 34-inch OLEDs we've seen have been QD OLED, topping out around that 175Hz refresh rate. So I thought, oh, is this, a second generation option for that? But no, this is actually using LG's new W OLED. LG have put into their roadmap a W OLED 34-inch 3440 by 1440 monitor at 240Hz, scheduled again around for the sort of Q2 timeframe in 2024 for that panel being released. So if we scroll down here and we have a look at pricing and availability again, they're talking about a Q2 2024 release date based on the roadmap. But then Asus are saying, at least in the press release, available in Q1. Product manager, at least according to Simon from TFT Central, could even be released before the end of this year. Not really sure what to believe there, whether that's panel roadmap, press release, product manager, lots of different timeframes there. But again, with Asus monitors, a lot of the release timings and things like that can change and even change quite significantly. So again, I don't really know which way I'd hedge my bets here. Probably 2024 at some point. It is W OLED, so it'll be a little different timing to some of the Samsung QD OLED stuff. So this is going to be a slightly different experience to what you would get on some of the other monitors. One of the key features here being the 800R curve. The QD OLED monitors typically have 1800R, so this means that the W OLED variant will be more curved. So if you're into more of a curve, then maybe the PG34W CDM will be for you. But I think most people will be deciding based on the higher 240Hz refresh rate versus 175Hz, which I do believe is a noticeable difference. The upgrade there does produce better motion clarity, especially with an OLED. You get those fast, again, 0.03 millisecond rated response times, more like 0.3 millisecond. But yeah, you do get better motion clarity, better future proofing with 240Hz as well. So this is potentially going to be a better option for people. You also get the differences of using W OLED versus QD OLED, so different subpixel layout. Unfortunately, I think that the W OLED RWBG layout listed here is worse than the QD OLED triangle RGB layout for text rendering at this sort of pixel density. So it'll be very similar pixel density to what we've seen from existing monitors. We already know the triangular RGB layout looks a little better at 1440p class density. Anyway, when we look at this W OLED versus QD OLED, potentially QD OLED would have the advantage there. This interesting information here says that Asus do think that newer panels will improve things through an improved algorithm, although the pixel structure remains unchanged. At least here, Simon's impressions are that it didn't look much different to the 27-inch models. So I would expect that pixel clarity, pixel density, text clarity is probably going to be one of the negatives for this panel, maybe one of the reasons why you wouldn't buy it. But then again, they are claiming other benefits. Screen coating, again, that's probably one of the deciding factors. WOLED panels typically use, they don't have the light reflectivity issue, the raised blacks that we see from QD-OLEDs in some lighting conditions. WOLED panels, they, at least for these sort of monitors, use matte screen coatings, and this is at least what they're suggesting here. Simon, again from TFT Central, is suggesting that they're using a matte screen coating for this, which will disappoint the glossy screen fans. We have seen WOLEDs also use glossy, but for this monitor being a desktop monitor, Asus typically with their WOLED implementations have used the matte screen coating, even for like their 42-inch 4K monitors. So yeah, this monitor using matte doesn't really surprise me all that much. And again, yeah, they're talking about the perceived contrast ratio as well, just due to the differences in functionality there. DisplayPort, HDMI 2.1, USB Type-C, so very much expected. Built-in KVM, that's good to see as well. And we'll just round this one off by talking about the brightness levels here. They're suggesting a 1300 nit peak brightness for HDR at a 3% APL, which drops a bit to 650 nits at a 10% APL. So with WOLED monitors, these specs are, at least in my opinion, a little bit less accurate than what we see from QD-OLED monitors. So when a QD-OLED says 1000 nits and they say 400 nits for 10%, typically that is what we actually see for real-world usage. But for a lot of other WOLED monitors that we've seen claims of 1000 nits, but then real-world brightness will be, again, anywhere from like 700 to 900 nits for sort of that peak setup. And then for 10% APL, you may see anywhere from sort of 550 to 650 nits. So with Asus, I'd probably be expecting this 10% number to be relatively close. The question will be whether 1300 nits is actually achievable or not and how close they get. And it can also be determined by factors like white balance, like how much blue are they putting into the light output. The more blue, the more cold tone we get, the higher peak brightness figures we typically achieve. And then we turn it into like a 6500K mode and suddenly that peak brightness figure drops. With that said, the PG27AQDM uses that WOLED panel and can achieve up to around 900 nits using high quality, 6500K white balance sort of settings. So if they're claiming the previous models were 1000 nits, the new models are 1300 nits, then maybe we would see in the 1100 to 1200 nit range, which would certainly be very impressive for this sort of monitor. And again, give you a reason to buy it over QD-OLED. That'd be high, sort of slightly higher peak brightness. You'd be getting the higher refresh rate as well, the different screen coding. But then there may be the downsides of factors like the WBG subpixel layout. WOLED panels also can differ in terms of how things like automatic brightness limiters work. I haven't seen any specs here about sort of full screen brightness. So again, whether they can hit 250 nits for sort of a full screen image for SDR usage is yet to be seen. And of course, there's all the other differences, things like burn-in and other factors. But it does give you competition. It is going to give competition to the market. You want to have multiple different panels offering similar specifications because it means there's, it depends on what you're after. You may be after some of the specific features of QD-OLED, you may be after some of the specific features of WOLED, and then you can choose between them, which I think is certainly pretty beneficial. So yeah, those are the two main monitor announcements that we've seen from Gamescom, at least so far, with these Asus monitors. I thought it's probably worth just getting on and talking about 32-inch 4K OLED monitors at 240 Hz because I know a lot of people that are fans of monitors and Monitors Unboxed would be excited to hear that news and my thoughts about it. But I'm also very interested to check out the 34-inch WOLED option as well. With these monitors, I guess a quick caveat here is that I would expect other brands to also be using these panels and releasing their monitors around a similar time. We have seen that with both WOLED and QD-OLED that, yeah, a brand like Alienware may get a couple of months head start, or a brand like Samsung, in the case of their OLED G9, may get a couple of months head start, but then other brands will start using those panels. So The Asus model may come to market first, but I would expect that all of the other brands currently using OLED panels, Samsung, for example, Alienware, for example, LG, for example, would be also looking at releasing monitors using these specifications around that time in 2024. So yeah, it looks like next year we'll be getting even more OLED monitors to be testing and reviewing on the channel, which I'm always excited about. And yeah, new panel technology. Great. Love to see it. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. If you appreciate this style of news video, sort of just a quick off the cuff, unscripted look at monitors as they come in nice and hot, yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think of the format. Again, podcast setup. So if you are interested in more of the PC hardware scene, we have got the Hardware Unboxed podcast for you. And there's just generally other display content right here on this channel. More reviews coming up, more top 10 rankings, analysis, all that sort of thing. So it's well worth subscribing. And if you do want to support the channel, we have Patreon and Floatplane links in the description. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.